All right, let's continue our mini lessons. Guys, what stage are we in sprint planning? We are doing sprint planning with the team, okay? Now, we have a document called what? Product Backlog, which is for all of the project. Now, we have another tiny little document called Sprint Backlog. Okay, in a sprint planning, we pull work from Product Backlog, okay, for the current sprint, for the next sprint, okay? Now, where do we keep these pulled work? We document them somewhere. That is called Sprint Backlog. Each sprint, each of those 2-week fixed time periods have their own backlog. So Sprint Backlog is tiny little backlog for that sprint. Okay, we include, for example, user stories that is going to be completed with the details associated with user stories, like acceptance criteria of each of these user stories, story points, prioritization, any details that we have. Okay, so this is Sprint Backlog. Now, another step that we take in sprint planning is, if that user story is still a little bit big, we could break it down into smaller tasks. Okay, remember tasks, guys. In predictive projects, the smallest level of WBS was what? Work packages. Okay, but in schedule part of the tutorial, you're gonna see that we break down work packages into activities and tasks to make them doable, to plan better for schedule and cost. Okay, now we do somehow same thing here in adaptive projects. Yeah, we said the smallest size requirements is user story, but if a user story is still too big and that user story needs the involvement of, for example, UI, tester, developer, all at the same time, we could break it down into smaller tasks. So each team member do one task. Okay, based on their skills and based on their expertise, they can pull tasks to complete that user story. So tasks is another concept that you could consider. And guys, feel free to read the examples because I think these are obvious. I don't want to dig in further and waste time here. And so sprint planning session or sprint planning ceremony will be wrapped up with one final sentence. Guys, we said the all project, okay, in step 2, in part 2, we said all projects, okay, has one vision, and we call it product vision, which was one line statement that explains why the project exists and what value it brings. Now, we have tiny little statement for each sprint, which is called sprint goal. Okay, that sprint goal in one sentence explains what value completing this sprint will add to all project. This is a sprint goal. Okay, beautiful, I guess, very beautiful. And guys, how a sprint goal help a development team? For example, mid-sprint, stakeholder requests something, or one team member want to do something in that sprint that hasn't been planned. Now, development team will throw a meeting and ask if those requested things, if that team member's recommendation is aligned with a sprint goal or has nothing to do with a sprint goal. If it has nothing to do with sprint goal, we say shut up and go. No, we don't say shut up. We say, a sprint goal is different. This suggestion is good, but not for now. Okay? This is how we use a sprint goal. And once we're in sprint retrospective and sprint review, we compare the actual delivered thing with our sprint goal and see if there is the final deliverable of that sprint actually matches our goal or not. This is the benefits of having a great sprint goal. Now, let's wrap up this part of the scope management in adaptive projects with a beautiful mini question. What do you think? I think you agree with me. Let's get it done together. All right, let's get this mini question done. You are a project manager supporting an agile team midway through a sprint when you notice team members working toward different outcomes. Not cool. Some focus on new features, others fix older issues they personally consider important. The product owner assumed the sprint goal was clear because it was mentioned once during sprint planning, but it was never documented or reinforced. Stakeholders are now confused because the work appears unfocused. What should the team have done to avoid this situation? The question better say, what should the Scrum Master or Project Manager or you have done to avoid the situation? A, expanded the sprint backlog to include everything stakeholders wanted to each member, so each member could work on what they felt added value. B, asked leadership to define the sprint goal to ensure alignment with organizational expectations. C, created a clear and concise sprint goal that was visible, documented, and repeatedly reinforced throughout the sprint. And D, allowed individual team members to interpret the sprint goal based on their own understanding to promote autonomy. Good question. I think you got the right option. Guys, what's the problem? Team has started the sprint, okay? Team members are not focused, okay? The tasks that are being done or user stories that are being done, a group of team members is focusing on something else and the other group is focusing on some other things. Not focused. They don't share, they do not have shared understanding, shared vision for that sprint. So it is signaling bad sprint planning. Where were you as a Scrum Master? Where were you as a project manager? It is your fault again. Guys, we need to have good sprint planning. You need to make sure your development team knows the sprint goal. Okay, we come up, document everything in a sprint backlog and a sprint goal. For each sprint, we do sprint planning, which takes a couple hours. Now, we need to make sure that output of that sprint planning ceremony is a shared understanding. Every step, every task we do in this sprint adds value to and takes steps toward reaching that sprint goal. Apparently, the sprint goal hasn't been reinforced. Let's go through the options. Option A says, expand the sprint backlog to include everything stakeholders want. No, guys. Stakeholders' needs and expectations are recorded in product backlog. Sprint backlog is for development team. They pool work based on stakeholders' needs and expectations, and they added them to sprint backlog. We don't include stakeholders' expectations directly to sprint backlog. So option A does not make sense here. Option B suggests asked leadership to define the sprint goal. Guys, remember, before the step 3, that part 3, okay? So team foundation and then customer needs and product backlog. Before that, team member was not that much involved. But once sprint planning starts, once our sprint starts, everything, every decision is with development team and a Scrum Master. Leadership cannot enforce and cannot dictate sprint goal. No, sprint goal should be written by Scrum Master and development team combined collaboratively together, not the leadership. Nobody can dictate a goal for that sprint. No. Okay, so option B is not a good one. And yeah, option C, create a clear and concise sprint goal that was visible, documented, and repeatedly reinforced throughout the sprint. Very, very good option. Guys, the problem was lack of a sprint goal or was low reinforcement of a sprint goal. If we repeat, if we document, if we make it visible, the sprint goal, now every action, every task that is being done, and team members would know that if this task that I'm doing add value to that sprint goal is towards that sprint goal or not. If it is not toward that, they wouldn't do it. Okay, so option C is the best option so far. Let's go to option D. Option D allowed individual team members to interpret the sprint goal based on their own understanding. We don't have such a thing as their own understanding. We have shared understanding concept. Everybody needs to have same understanding. It is just one project, guys. Okay, it's not 100 projects. One project needs one understanding. That's why option C is the best option. Please feel free to read the description because I think we have explained it enough. Now, please go through mini FAQs. I've added some extra points about this part of scope management in adaptive projects. Feel free to review them, all questions and answers, and I'll see you in mini summary of this part. Let's get it done, guys.